Hi, it's Steve and Joe from Freshagenda, and Steve, this week we have a bit of an overview of the latest trade trends.
A sneak peek.
Yep. A bit of commentary on the very interesting GDT event, another positive one for this week, and then of course chart of the week.
Okay, can't wait. Okay, so we've literally just added up December trade, making a few assumptions here and there for some missing bits, but it's mostly together. Trade was dead flat, no change. So wondering whether the logistical hassles that have been going on in several parts of the world, particularly off the west coast of the US, have had a bearing on that.
Yeah, the availability of containers has been a critical logjam for trade.
May have been, but we did have that timing issue which pushed forward last year, the whole milk powder trade. So China's intake of whole milk powder in the month was down quite a bit. Yep. So that's possibly part of that story. But so in the highlights, look, powders were well down with that timing difference, perhaps.
Yep.
But cheese well up, and you can see, cheese is quite strong. So we weren't looking for that. What drove that, which was quite interesting. Thinking that maybe a bit of Brexit, pre-Brexit panic, and there was a little bit of that.
Yep.
But it seems to be across the board. There was just a strong month year on year across most regions.
Okay.
So
interesting.
That is interesting because prices have certainly been firming. Weather's been a bit of a clearance out of the US. Anyway, we'll have a look at that, but that's probably not part of it. But you can see the league table there. So strange developments there with who's at the top of that. But that's all about the shortage of whole milk powder, or the shortage of milk in Brazil, and the attractiveness of in neighbouring supply. So that's what's mostly driven that. China up there in the top, and down the bottom the usual suspects. Over to GDT, which was a positive event across the board. We had a couple of contracts dip, but generally quite good. You can see there the relativity of prices, and we'll come on to that a bit more, but that's certainly an interesting background. Skim being the weakest player here, and that's got a bit to do with what's happening elsewhere, perhaps. But
it's still showing that that GDT mechanism. It is pushing out ahead of what's happening in the larger market, isn't it? Some of those prices that are being achieved.
That's right. So whole milk powder was the standout, and this event gave us a result which took us right back to May 2014.
The good old days of booming
when things
commodity
were crazy.
Price. Yeah.
So that's been a roll that keeps going, and here's probably why. So lining up a few different pieces of data, which isn't just data, but we've had the background story about China doing more food security buying and bolstering stocks. We see on the left-hand side there the local intel that suggests whole milk powder stocks were fairly tight at the end of the year. So we aren't yet in a zone with the landed prices, even in these later events, where it's beyond what's been the range before.
The alternative option for converting local milk into powder is getting more and more expensive. So that raises the floor, I suppose, on those.
So the comparison we made there is in the red line is probably the one that's more relevant, which is the pure spot whole milk powder that converts into a ship price, pretty much. It's the New Zealand average. But that is, it's bounced up again. We're well within a band. So we're within a band that we've been in the last few years.
Sure.
The big difference, as you say, is that green line we've superimposed on here, which is the in the Chinese currency, their farm gate milk price, which is shot up, and it's at historic highs. So that's the different setting, which you can look back and say, that's more expensive. That's a change.
Yes.
So more milk is being pulled into fresh, less being available for manufacturing. And so and
more expensive for manufacturing.
And when the alternative is so expensive, that's going to support. So we're probably not done yet.
Yeah, a bit more headroom for imported product for sure.
Going across to skim milk powder, that's probably why it was a bit meek. We've seen, we've known about the weakness in the US for a little while, but Europe has also gone a little weaker in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. So that premium's opened up again for New Zealand product.
Nearly $400 a tonne on GDT between like-for-like products, which is pretty interesting, and the demand was a little weaker, but still it was a bit more scattered. So
yeah.
And then when you look at butter, and this is probably an even crazier chart, that just I think some of the relativities are here. And I put on the AMF equivalent here, which is interesting, probably more your benchmark.
So that's been converted into commercial butter equivalent, so it is comparable to butter.
That's right. And I would do the comparison against the EU price, because I think, we're seeing a mechanism on butter, small tonnages, China dominating that buying, pulling in product, and it's not expensive for them, as we'll see on the next slide. So it's
pushing it up against, past those relativities, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas AMF has just bobbed after being cheaper for a long time in terms of butter. In terms of butter equivalents, it's just bobbed up in the last couple of events. We talked about that last video, where we had that nice little behaviour of availability of tonnages versus prices, and we suggested the rally wasn't over then. So it's helped us.
We were right.
Got it right. All right.
Don't look surprised.
No. So fat marches on, but for how long? And here's that little butter chart at the top there, showing where we're in the middle of the band in terms of the cost, the landed cost. So still not too expensive for buyers in that market, given the weakness of the US dollar. But showing this event, I guess one of the themes was that Chinese buying was a little, they backed off a little bit, and others jumped in. I think it's encouraging that in whole milk powder, Southeast Asian buyers came in and took up a chunk, which was interesting at these prices.
Yeah.
So
absolutely, very encouraging.
Demand's good.
Yeah.
All right. And chart of the week, Joe, what have you got?
So I thought we'd go across to the US, Steve, and have a look at what's happening with disappearance, and specifically cheese, which has been a bit of a roller coaster in terms of pricing. Just another data point showing how weak demand for cheese has been in that market without those government buying programs. So really pushed up that commercial disappearance through the end of 2020. Then when those programs have backed off, it's really fallen in a heap, hasn't it?
Yeah, slumped in December.
Yeah, and that's American cheese, which includes cheddar, which is the retail
product
story. So you would hope that it would be a little bit stronger maybe when these government programs wind up again, or they won't be anywhere near the volume of last year, and also this ongoing drain on household finances can't be good for demand.
And that's probably at work here, because that's, this is disappearance. It's going into the supply chain, so it's got a little while before it reaches the consumer. But that's, when prices were weakening quite a bit, that slowed down. So underlying demand is soft.
Absolutely.
All right, and that's all we have this week, this time. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be back soon.